Yesterday, we saw one of the biggest altcoin sell-offs in the past 6 months. The market was bleeding, many alts went down 10, 15, 20%, but what we've seen in the 24 hours since then is a massive reversal across the market, seeing a lot of altcoins starting to rally from yesterday's lows. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the question of whether that was the bottom, whether it's time to FOMO into alts now, and what altcoins are the best altcoins to start positioning in now, given yesterday's events. We're going to go through all of that and more to make sure that you are well prepped for the next few weeks of crypto. There were some massive developments that occurred overnight that we need to discuss today. And overall, this is going to be an important market update for you after yesterday's crazy events. So the first thing I want to refer to here is Total 3. This is the cryptocurrency market index representing the altcoins, so excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can see yesterday's wick took us down to that major support level at $557 billion. And since then, it's bounced nicely, reversing over 50% of this weekly candle and is now starting to flirt with this major pivot point on the daily. So if I go onto the daily chart here, you can see the wick almost took us down to that support. We are now coming back up to see if we can reclaim the daily support that we previously lost after breaking down from this flag here that I pointed out on multiple shows. So the recovery was definitely welcomed in the market, many alts responding well off the back of this. But is this going to sustain? That's a question that I'm going to answer later in today's video. Looking at Bitcoin now, because this is the leader of the market. In yesterday's video, I said, if altcoins are to have a strong alt season this year, or if alts are going to make a major recovery, we're going to need a very strong Bitcoin market. In fact, Bitcoin breaking all-time highs is probably the most bullish thing that could happen for the market in absence of many other retail drivers. When Bitcoin's in the media, when people are talking about Bitcoin, it tends to lift the tide, rising all the altcoin ships in the market. And that's why Bitcoin becomes such an important focal point of the market right now. And looking at the Bitcoin chart on the daily, you can see, like Total 3, we did break below a major level on the daily time frame. This could be a deviation. Remember in yesterday's video, I said, watch to see how Bitcoin starts to react around this level. The bounce is the first part that you need for a reclamation, but what we actually need is a daily candle close above $66,400 in order to solidify this mid-range to potentially come back up and test the upper range here. So a bit still has to play out for Bitcoin on the daily time frame to reclaim this level. So similar to Total 3, on the daily, we have had a bounce. We are trying to reclaim major levels. But on the weekly, Bitcoin is actually looking a bit stronger. So if you zoom out, and this tends to be the case in crypto, the further you zoom out, the more bullish things tend to look and the less scary things tend to look. You can see that Bitcoin is actually still hovering above its major weekly level. And the weekly level that I'm referring to here is the original all-time high for Bitcoin in April 2021, which is around $64,600. So that is still a major support level on the weekly that we do need to look at. Of course, the daily pivot points are important in terms of market directionality, but for higher time frame macro trends, the weekly is going to be a chart that you want to keep your eye on. And for now, this does look like a bullish retest of the $64,500 level. So all is not over unless we actually start closing below in the weekly. Then you can assert we're probably going to come back down to this range low area. And as I discussed before, range low on the Bitcoin chart is 60K. That is your bearish scenario here. But the market is starting to reverse, which is a good sign. Now, one of the major reasons why the market did reverse today, and especially Ethereum, which we're going to get into as the strongest performer on the bounce, is due to a massive development in regards to the SEC's pursuit of Ethereum. So you see consensus here announcing that Ethereum survives the SEC. Today, we're happy to announce a major win for Ethereum developers, tech providers, and industry participants. The enforcement division of the SEC has officially notified us that it is closing its investigation into Ethereum 2.0. This means that the SEC will not bring charges alleging that sales of ETH are securities transactions. Now, up until this point, we have not had confirmation officially, although there's been speculation due to the Ethereum ETF approval, that Ethereum is not a security. this pretty much puts it to bed. This is the final nail in the coffin for the ETH is a security claim, which obviously paves the way for an Ethereum ETF, and more importantly, potentially sets precedent for other proof-of-stake tokens in the market. There are some saying that this is purely political heading into the election. I do think there is an element of truth to that, but the matter of the fact here is that Ethereum is not a security. And as a result, we have seen ETH pivot very strongly off the lows, and many of the top leaders that we're going to discuss later in today's video as potentially the best bounce plays are actually in the Ethereum ecosystem. Now, yesterday in my private Discord, the Miles High Club, I did a post in the general chat here saying longing ETH is probably the easiest short to midterm play here. It has the strongest narrative ETH ETF. It retraced 50% of its entire ETH ETF pump. Its relative strength versus alts is strong, and ETH BTC has also reversed. If alts recover, expecting ETH to lead. What has ended up happening in the last 24 hours? Alts recovering and ETH leading. Pretty much exactly what I said in the Discord here. And longing ETH actually was the easiest short to midterm play. I actually think Ethereum will probably continue to lead the market in the face of the ETH ETF, especially as we approach that date. It's being touted to be July 2nd, so keep your eye on that date. But I think this does bode well for Ethereum, and that's one of the reasons why I posted this in the Discord earlier. It wasn't just me that had success in the Discord. It was also Paradise. He picked two of the strongest bounces off the bottom. One was ENS, which had an amazing recovery. It's actually showing up here on Bounty Bubbles as one of the strongest performers here. As you can see, the ENS bubble. And he also selected ONDO as a strong bounce play. This was also a coin that pivoted nicely from its major support level at $1. I think it's now sitting at around $1.20. So that recovered nicely. So we did quite well in the Discord yesterday, picking some of these plays. Also in yesterday's show, I did go through some of the plays that I was making. I said that I was buying the dip. So far, things look good. Of course, there is a bit to play out, but all the dip buys we did make yesterday ended up coming to fruition, and it's once again a lesson of buying fear and capitulation in the market. Pretty much time and time again, it does eventuate to being a profitable strategy on these major liquidation cascades. If you are interested in joining the Mars High Club community, by the way, I'm opening up just 100 spots over the next 6 days. So if you didn't manage to make the last 2 intakes, as I know I couldn't let everyone in because we limited it to 300 spots, there is a small window now to get into the Mars High Club for the next intake, which is in just 6 days' time. After this, the window is going to be closed for another month, so your next chance to get into the community won't be until the end of July. So if you are interested, now is the time to do it. Spots are going fast because we are only doing 100 slots for the group. We're trying to keep it a super limited, exclusive community. It's, of course, myself, another 4 amazing analysts, Paradise included, Fabian, who's our macro expert, Doc, who's our high time frame trading expert, and we also have all sorts of things like giveaways, IDOs, etc. in the group, alongside the amazing Alpha, of course. So I'll leave the link in the description for those that are interested in checking that out. And I also want to go through my tweet here where I was a little bit cryptic. I said bidding, and then shortly after I said, you'll often catch me buying on days where it's extremely unpopular to do so. You'll also catch me selling on days where it's extremely uncomfortable for fear of missing out / unpopular to do so. This strategy has worked extremely well for me over the past 2 years. My absolute favorite time to buy is during capitulation wicks. RR here is at its highest. Not a fan of buying into slow bleeds unless there's a confirmed reversal, with a few exceptions. High time frame limit orders are your best friends during times like these. If you actually look at the time of this tweet, it was at 1:02 p.m. The original bidding tweet was at 12:50 p.m. If you want to line this up with the chart, that was literally the bottom for alts. I mean, not quite the exact bottom. It happened at around 11:20, but at 12 o'clock, you can see we were in this zone for alts. If you want to look at the Ethereum chart, we were in this zone. So it was nice to catch the capitulation week because a lot of alts have bounced 15, 20, 25% off the lows. And look, that's not me to shamelessly collect clout. Because obviously this market has been tricky to trade. The major reason I'm bringing this up is because I must highlight this point I'm making in this tweet about buying when it feels uncomfortable and selling when it feels uncomfortable. If you trade comfort in this market, it's likely going to lead to bad emotional decisions. The best risk-reward entries are typically during these major forced sell-offs. Forced selling, time and time again, has proven to be a successful accumulation strategy in the market. Now, there are times where you get a wick and then it bounces and then it bleeds lower and ends up going lower. And look, this could still happen over the next few weeks. I'm not entirely ruining that out, but it's all about putting yourself in a position where every time you take a trade, your expected value is positive. And I do find these capitulation wicks, as we saw in April, as we saw yesterday, to be those really strong accumulation opportunities in the market. If you're not buying into these wicks, it's best to wait for confirmed reversals on altcoins you're bullish on rather than trying to catch a coin that's bleeding slowly. I'm always a fan of waiting for a confirmed reversal on a coin or catching a major sell-off rather than buying into slow bleed, because that can be a recipe for disaster. And it's kind of funny. I had some people in my comments yesterday, I just want to touch on this, saying, oh, Miles, you're always pivoting. Some days you're bullish, some days you're bearish. That's just the thumbnail of the video, right? Thumbnails and titles of YouTube videos are often detached from the content itself. And everyone that's watched this channel over the last 6 months would know my messaging in these shows, even on extremely bullish days, has been the same. Wait for major red days to accumulate. Even if you go back into the videos that I did 3 months ago, where the thumbnail was super bullish and the title was super bullish to capture attention, if you watch the actual content of that video, which is the number one important thing, it's the actual content here. How you get viewers in on YouTube is one part of the game. The main part that I always make sure I put my 100% all into is the actual content. And in the content of those bullish videos, you will know that time and time again, I've said, wait for major pullbacks. Wait for extreme red days on these coins. They do come. And I know at the time, it sometimes feels like they're never going to come. When the market's ripping, when meme coins are exploding, you feel like you're going to miss it. Trust me, time and time again, you will get your entries. And yesterday was one of those days to get entries. And you'll notice if you follow my Twitter, I basically never tweet that I'm bidding. I rarely publicly tweet that I'm buying. The last 2 times, and you can fact check this, that I've said that I've publicly bought on Twitter was June 18th and I think it was April 14th, the last major liquidation cascade. Those are the only 2 times. You can go through and look at my Twitter. And that's because these are the actual days where I buy. And in between, I might do a little bit of buying for strong narratives. I might buy some breakouts if there's a good trade. I stay active in the market, but I'm not making big spot positional trades or positional buys when you're in the middle of a range. That's just not how I operate. Look, everyone's different. Some people can take a 6-month approach to the market where they zoom out and they decide, look, I just want to accumulate for the next 6 months. I'm going to buy now. I'm going to just put up with any downside if I'm underwater, and then I'm going to just log off and come back later. That is one strategy. For me, I prefer to be a little bit more active and make sure to take advantage of these capitulation events when we do get them. And then also when the market is giving you extreme green, make sure to shift some of that liquidity back into stablecoins. Just remember this point. I know I've said it many, many, many times, as I said before, but just remember this point next time the market is A, super bearish, or B, super, super, super bullish. Because honestly, it's saved me time and time again, and it's a message I want to get across. That's why some of those comments yesterday annoyed me. I mean, comments usually don't get to me. It is what it is. It's YouTube, but I think those who actually watch these videos, you guys know. Like, if you actually watch the content, I'm not talking about the thumbnails. The titles and thumbnails are one thing. We can get into that later. That's the YouTube algorithm, right? The actual content inside those videos, I think my messaging has been super consistent on that point for many, 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 many months, even during the bullish days. So what's next for the market? Let's take a look at what the market is currently showing us in terms of its next direction. And then let's also look at some of the altcoins which could potentially be strong plays here. The first thing I want to look at is Velo data, which has the funding APR heat map, which shows that a lot of altcoins are actually still in the negative. So what happened over the last days, we saw pretty much a complete leverage reset in the market, which is a really positive thing, because if you go back, you can see at certain points, the market's had a little bit too much leverage. Even if you go back to the start of June, when things largely were reset, there were still a few coins in the market which were relatively positive in terms of their funding APR, meaning there was a lot of long interest. Now, that funding is almost completely reset. Many coins are actually paying you to long in terms of funding rates, which means that the market has shifted bearish in terms of its sentiment. But this is good because you can't have rallies, you can't have bounces, you can't have sustained periods to the upside where funding APR is red. because it often ends up in a major liquidation cascade as leverage builds up and builds up and builds up, and then eventually the house of cards topples. So when you do have funding rates looking like this, that is a nice healthy reset for the market, and generally speaking, I welcome it. Another interesting chart that I want to turn your attention to is the speculation index. The speculation index is the percentage of altcoins with 90-day returns greater than Bitcoin. High readings suggest mounting speculation, lower readings suggest capitulation and potentially greater investment opportunities in alts. This is the lowest speculation index that we have seen since Q4 2023. Now, if you want to go back on the total 3 chart and look at where alts were in Q4 2023, I mean, I'm going to need to zoom out even more. They were so much lower. They were all the way back here at 426 bills. Since then, the altcoin market has run up 47%. Obviously, in that period, you've had things like WIF pull crazy multiples, Solana pull crazy multiples. Bitcoin, of course, led the market and pulled bigger multiples than alts. But for this discussion, of course, we are focusing on the altcoins. So this is a really positive sign because it basically says that this is the best place to bid altcoins since 2023. Now, patience is required because sometimes we can stay in this zone for a little while. We saw in 2021, we chopped here for a few months. 2022, we touched it multiple times. 2023, we hovered here for 8 months. But now it's a little bit of a different paradigm because we're getting this reset in a bull market. The last time we saw altcoins reset in a bull market was 2021. And if you guys remember, back to 2021, if we go onto the weekly chart, this was the period here where we had that major panic before the resumption of the bull run and then new all-time highs on Bitcoin. And funnily enough, price action for alts is looking pretty similar from a fractal perspective to Bitcoin's price action back in 2021. In fact, in my bookmarks here, I have an amazing tweet which represents this. It was honestly crazy. It was by ResDegen. You can see the fractal here is pretty much playing out exactly the same for altcoins as it was for Bitcoin in 2021. You have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, which is another sideways chop for roughly 50 days. I'm not saying this will exactly play out, but it is interesting. Followed by a resumption to the upside and then, of course, eventual all-time highs in November. So this is interesting because this fractal corresponds with the end of summer. And my thesis in general has been summer is going to chop, and coming out of summer, Q3, Q4, heading into the election with some of the really positive catalysts we do have, which I want to touch on later, that is where you could see expansion to the upside. So really right now, the name of the game is surviving this summer chop, taking advantage of these major capitulation events as we get them, making sure your portfolio is optimized. If you're holding 30 altcoins, condense it down, hold a basket of assets you have conviction in, and just don't flinch over these summer months. And coming out the other side, you should be able to do quite well. But of course, the hard part is managing your emotions in the meantime. And for some reason, yesterday was a super emotional day. I mean, I get it. Saying for some reason is actually a little bit dismissive because it was hard. And, I took a big hit on a lot of my spot positions, but it was also an opportunity. And I was able to, make up a lot of ground by actually buying into that capitulation and fear. So that's something to remember. Another really interesting chart, I'm just hitting you with interesting data points here today, is the S&P index relative to Bitcoin. You can see since April 25th, the discrepancy is almost 10% between the correlation of Bitcoin and the S&P 500, meaning the S&P is making new highs and crypto is significantly lagging. Previous periods where we have seen this be the case, Bitcoin has quickly re-correlated to the NASDAQ and S&P. You can see here that in a bull market, Bitcoin typically has multiple events where it re-correlates with the NASDAQ. So I don't expect this decorrelation to last long. Now, is this actionable in the short term? I wouldn't say it's extremely actionable considering we don't know exactly when this is going to turn around. Similar to an RSI, it can give you a general indication as to whether something is overbought or oversold, but it won't tell you exactly when that market is going to turn around or when recorrelation or decorrelation is going to happen. But we can definitely assert that at some point, Bitcoin will recorrelate. And if the S&P is continuing to pump and make new all-time highs, one could only guess that this recorrelation should happen to the upside. Unless, of course, the S&P dumps and Bitcoin goes sideways, and then, of course, it recorrelates that way. That is another scenario, so it doesn't necessarily need to mean a massive market pump. But either way, I do think we see recorrelation, and that is a bullish thing in my opinion if that does occur. And of course, the S&P is continuing to push to new highs. DeFi Squared had a post today saying sentiment on alts seems pretty much rock bottom, so I think it's a decent time to slowly start picking up a few that still have narratives but are overly wrecked from liquidations. Because he's right here, a lot of alts still got smacked. They didn't necessarily recover too well, but I mean, even some of these that recovered, they still haven't recovered their full liquidation wick, right? Even Ethereum, which has bounced, still hasn't recovered the full extent of the downturn. So there are still some alts here, which I think from a macro point of view, maybe not over the next 3 or 4 days, but at least, with a multi-month time horizon, are now starting to give relatively compelling entry opportunities. And these are alts that I'll be covering a lot later in the week. I'm going to do a video later in the week with my top 4 altcoin portfolios. So if I could only hold 4 alts, what would they be? Make sure you are subscribed and have that post notification bell turned on so you don't miss the alpha. But I will go through some now which are showing strength. And spoiler alert, pretty much everything that is performing well right now is under the Ethereum narrative. So now let's go into the alts that I am looking at. If you don't want to trade any of these alts, by the way, we have a new campaign on Bitget, which allows you to get a $100 deposit bonus. It's a 10% bonus, meaning if you deposit $1,000, you get $100. If you deposit $500, you'll get $50. Cool. Then what you're able to do after you sign up is take part in the mystery campaign. Basically what this means is you're going to win a mystery prize. The prizes are in front of you: 15 USD, 500,000 Pepe, 100 BGB, 20 WIF. You could win these prizes just by clicking the button here. In order to win these prizes, you will need entry tickets. To get an entry ticket, you just need to build up $10,000 worth of volume, spot or futures on the exchange. And this is unlimited. So every time you hit 10,000, you're going to get another entry, another entry, another entry, another entry. And you could basically just pepper this away and just keep entering and keep winning prizes. This is only going for 11 days from the time of recording this video. So you've got 11 days. There's a countdown clock when you click the link in the description. All you've got to do is click the register now button, sign up for a new account, get the deposit bonus, and you'll also be able to take part in the mystery box campaign here as well. So what is the focus in terms of alts? There's pretty much 2 camps. I'm going to speak about camp number 2 in today's video. But camp 1 is, of course, what I touched on before. These are the longer time frame alts that maybe you're planning on accumulating during these capitulation events for a 6 to 12 month outlook. Pretty much just spot and chilling. For me, what I focused on yesterday, as we discussed in the Discord and in the video, were the altcoins that was showing the strongest bounce potential. Because my objective at the moment is to outperform the market in the interim, and then I can shift positioning over to longer term stuff. So I'm basically trying to play the bounce. So this really depends on the strategy you're implementing in the market, but I'm going to talk about camp 2, as I mentioned, which is the altcoins that are showing relative strength. The first one is Ethereum. Ethereum is actually setting up quite nicely from a PA perspective because you have the lows here in October, but since then, it's been following this trend line. And interestingly, this trend line composes of 1, this diagonal trend, but 2, the 200 EMA on the daily, which is an indicator that I love, which is pretty much following this uptrend to a T. You have your consistent series of higher lows. Even this pivot of a major daily level was a higher low at $3,380. And despite that being a liquidation event, the bounce is now looking like it's going to make another higher low, which is following this pattern here. So for Ethereum, any major pullbacks, as long as we are maintaining this uptrend, for me, is a good buying opportunity. Why? Because short to midterm, as I said in my Discord, I do believe ETH is the easiest play. I think with the ETH ETF, it has the strongest narrative. Now that it's not a security, I think it has a little bit more leeway to catch an institutional bid. And I think the ETH narrative in general is the strongest altcoin narrative in the market right now. Now, of course, you have other trends which are going to crop up. No doubt AI is going to crop up. No doubt meme coins are going to crop up. RWA is kind of trading alongside the ETH narrative. We're going to discuss that in a second. But ETH is likely to be the dominant force in terms of altcoins, at least in the short to medium term. So off the back of this, what are some of the interesting alts here? Lido is interesting, pivoted very nicely off the lows. The wick pretty much made a perfect retest of this level on the daily. It's now currently flirting with the daily EMA 200. This is a level that acted as major support and at times also major resistance. It is resistance at the moment. If it can break above and also break above this diagonal level here, that could definitely lead to expansion to the upside. And your recent local high was $4. So The upside potential on a trade like this is around 70%, but I do expect relative strength-wise Lido to be a market leader just based on price action. There's really not crazy fundamental logic behind this. We're looking A at PA and 2 at a basic narrative, which is Ethereum. And Lido being the biggest liquid staking platform on Ethereum is clearly a beneficiary of the ETH tailwinds. Another one that's performing quite strongly is ENS. This is one that Paradise pointed out in the Discord yesterday as a strong bouncer when it was at $22. Looking at it now, it's at $26. So that was an amazing trade. Well done, Paradise. Has been killing it in the Discord. But this one popped nicely to the upside. And you do have those recent highs at $27 that ENS looks like it wants to clear. So once again, another ETH narrative coin performing strongly. Now for RWA, because RWA is also a beneficiary of this whole Larry Fink ETH tokenization narrative. In fact, there's this tweet here which I really like. It says, ETH spot ETFs are about to launch. ETH is officially a commodity. The SEC capitulated. ETH is finally scaling via L2s. Coinbase is championing ETH and its own layer 2. BlackRock is all in with BUIDL, the ETH ETF, and soon with tokenization products on Ethereum. Larry will be shilling ETH when the ETF launches. I have no doubt this will be the case. The tokenization narrative is likely to rear its head, which is great for RWA coins, ETH narrative, etc. BTC's regulatory moat is officially dead. ETH ETF inflows should top BTC's. Now, this is the one thing I disagree with. I don't think it'll top it nominally. I mean, this is an ETH pool, right? So, of course, it's going to side with ETH. I do agree with the ETH ETFs potentially surprising people. I just don't think it's going to beat Bitcoin. But anyway, nonetheless, it should make headlines. And I do think people will be talking about Ethereum. I've been in the market since 2017. This is the best setup I've ever seen. ETH at 3,500 at this point is absolutely insane. I wouldn't say it's the best setup I've ever seen, but I would say it's probably the best risk-reward setup in the market right now. If you just want to beat the market, and I think right now, as I mentioned before, it's a little bit about survival. It's about staying in the game here, not capitulating before the main event. Then ETH pretty much gets your objective. It maybe gives you upside of 40, 50%. It limits downside, and it has a clear trend that you can follow, unlike a lot of alts, which are, making new local lows and are super hard to trade for that reason. So ONDO is interesting as an RWA play because it did wick down to $1. Now, remember what I said on all of my prior shows with ONDO. $1 is a major level you should be setting a high time frame limit order on. If you did set your orders there, from $1, it has bounced around 20% to the upside. The $1 level is super, super strong. The fact we were able to come down and test liquidity there is actually bullish in my opinion, considering we have now broken above the next resistance at 115. Consolidation above here means that ONDO could go and target that previous range high. So when you do get these major capitulation wicks on strong coins at major high time frame support levels, that is an absolute gift. And the only way that you're going to get exposure to these levels is via setting high time frame limit orders. And you can actually stagger these orders. So just in case it doesn't get filled, you can go, 1.04, 5, like you can stagger it around even slightly under to get, an average buy price around $1. TON is also one that's looking insanely strong. It bounced nicely, but what I like from TON is not the lower time frame, it's the daily. The daily and weekly chart looks absolutely insane. This level here, 7.7, is a major, major level. And if it can break above, I definitely see this running into double digits. Once again, like ETH, even like ONDO, these aren't 5 to 10x altcoin plays. These are outperform the market and maintain relative strength versus the rest of the market with your portfolio, which honestly, in the summer months, is kind of the objective, in my opinion. You can go for 10x's in this market, but the way you're going to get it is through meme coins or just being patient and waiting for later in the year. But if you want to maintain relative strength, I love these sort of coins, especially for me where I'm slightly more risk off in the market than I used to be. And that just happens as you accumulate more wealth. Generally, what happens is in the early days, when you start with, $1,000, $2,000, you're trying to take on a lot of risk, right? Once you get to 10K, you'll probably still take on risk depending on your objectives. 50K, maybe you're searching more for now 5x's, 10x's, not necessarily like moonshot plays. 100K, you get less risky. 1 million, you get less risky. So essentially over time, as you make more money, you take on less risk. Unless you're trying to shoot for some insane number, like Ansem's famous $8 million, then maybe you'll just need to keep taking on risk to get that. But generally speaking, the bigger your portfolio, the less risk you take, depending on your objectives, of course. Because some people in this market, they're trading with $1,000. They're happy to make 10K. If that's you, great. Like, not everyone wants to make millions of dollars. But for those that do, that's kind of the path that you end up taking in the market. So different coins will appeal to different people. But as I said, wealth preservation in the current environment is important. I just saw OM pop up on my trading view here. Of course, this is another RWA coin. I wasn't going to talk about this, but wanted to just have a look here. Actually did technically maintain this structure of higher lows. This one looks interesting. Now, this is kind of a play where you're not catching a falling knife because it hasn't made a lower low, but you do have invalidation. So your invalidation is actually this level here at 62 cents. So if you're willing to be invalidated in this region is not a bad buy in my opinion. If it starts to flip, that's where you would go in with bigger size on the confirmation, because if it makes a thrust to its previous high, then you are looking at an additional 38 to 40%. So this is an interesting play because you have invalidation and you have a clear uptrend. As soon as you break an uptrend, then you want to wait for a reversal and confirmation because it's way, way, way better. For example, let's say it breaks down like this. You don't want to be buying. That's a bad strategy. I'm sure a lot of you have caught knives in the past. Bad strategy doesn't work. So price goes down, buying. You're just wrecking yourself. What I prefer to do is wait. Okay, so let's say it does this. Wait for a reversal. Okay, I'm not going to get in yet. I'm going to wait for the first retest, go in with small size, have invalidation below. Second retest, bigger size, invalidation is now that next low. And then you're laddering in on the way up, which is actually an uptrend, and then you can raise your stop, raise your stop, raise your stop, so you have clear invalidation as opposed to catching a falling knife. Because here, at least you're getting into a token that's exhibiting strength. And you can also use the alt BTC pairs in order to see if a coin is strong versus Bitcoin. Another play I'm looking at that I want to mention today and later in the week, so make sure you are subscribed and have notice turned on, I'll be going through more alts and some longer term portfolio stuff. But in the shorter term, I think ZK is an interesting one. It's at 4.7. Many of the other layer 2s like Optimism, Arbitrum, Starknet are in the $7 to $8 billion range. So it's roughly a 50% discount from those coins. And that's largely because it released with massive supply pressure from the airdrop. And then, of course, the general market dropped on the same day that they were airdropping. So it just went down and down and down. So ZK did get smacked, but this is one I'm actually laddering into as a position. I think it can be a play that gives you a 50%, potentially, starts to reach equilibrium with some of these other L2s. And then another one I wanted to talk about is WIF, because this is a chart that kind of exemplifies the point I was making on Mantra before, and it's waiting for a confirmed reversal. So if WIF can reclaim this 223 level, that is the range low. Buying at the range low is pretty nice because you have invalidation below, and that is your capitulation wick. So these aren't really plays where you'll load up on crazy leverage. These are more spot plays in my opinion, because you have invalidation, it's only 10%, and then you have the upside to potentially go to range highs. And WIF is one from a longer term perspective that I do like, but Donald does make a good point in one of his prior posts that you probably don't want to be buying into a breakdown of range low, because this can go lower, right? So wait for a confirmed reversal and then get in. That's kind of how I'm going to play a coin like WIF. Like, you don't need to overcomplicate the market. A lot of the time, it really comes down to one of two things: buy capitulation wicks or buy dips in confirmed uptrends, and then you have invalidation. You always want to have invalidation when entering a trade. I feel like a lot of people, and I'm just saying this because I've had a lot of comments over the past few days on Twitter and YouTube, and not just on my channel, on other channels as well, of people like panicking, right? If you're panicking, I won't speak for everyone here, but it's likely because you didn't have clear invalidation when you entered a trade. So now you're stuck underwater. You probably bought close to the top, and now you're stuck underwater on a position and you're trying to catch a knife. That's not a fun position to be in, and you really can eradicate that by doing one simple thing, and that is every time you get into a trade, have clear invalidation. If that means taking a 10-15% loss, take the loss, protect capital, and get in on the resumption of the next uptrend. For a lot of people, that works. There's the other camp, as I mentioned, that can just park their hopes and dreams for 6 months. But that isn't the camp commenting on the videos panicking, right? Because if you're panicking, you probably don't have the mental fortitude to play that longer term game. So you really have to work out what your mindset is when it comes to trading. Because if you enter a long-term trade, but you're really flippant in your mindset and you start, exiting that trade against your invalidation criteria, it makes no sense. It's emotional and you'll get wrecked in the market. So I think also understanding your own propensities, your own mindset is really important when it comes to successful trading in the market. And you kind of work out a style that works for you. For some people, it's just accumulating and waiting, and they don't care. They're chilling. For some people, they're too panicked to be underwater in the meantime. And if that is you, and I did see a lot of comments about that, then sticking to that criteria of buying capitulation with clear invalidation and waiting for uptrends, I mean, it's going to work for the majority of people. So hopefully for some of you out there, that message resonates with you. And if you do want to join the Mars High Club, I'll leave a link in the description below. Where there's only 100 spots. I really don't know how long it's going to last, because yesterday I think we had 40 signups, if I'm not mistaken. So there's like around 60 slots left. And then we also do have overhang from last month as well. So there aren't many slots, but I can confirm at the time of recording, there were spots left to become part of the Miles High Club. There's 6 days, and then we're going to open up the gates to these 100 people. And then it's going to be shut for another month. So we're doing this really slow incremental growth of the group. I could just open it up to like 5,000 people, let everyone in, but I would prefer to keep it limited. And we're actually sub 1,000. So only like 900 people in the community right now, which is pretty small. But I'm trying to keep it that way in order to, foster an amazing community and be able to give back to them as well. Of course, I love you. You don't need to join the Mars High Club to be a loved member of my audience. I love everyone that watches and supports these videos. But I did want to create that group, and the whole point of creating that group was to go above and beyond, get some of the most amazing analysts in crypto into the group in order to just give extra alpha for those that are really, really serious about making it in this market. So there's a link in the description to that. Is there anything else I want to cover today? Yes, there is. It's this. I'm not going to elaborate on this. Just pause the video and read this tweet. This is the point I was making last week. Just disregard short-term noise, because in the last 2 months, we've had some of the biggest monumental changes in the crypto market that, in my opinion, are almost positive to eventuate later in the year. I'm very, very bullish from a macro perspective on the market. You've really got to treat these periods of capitulation, whatever you want to call it, as opportunities. I'm going to see you in the next video. Lots of alpha to come this week. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Peace out.